Hello everyone, welcome to this channel, and thank you for watching our videos. Today I will tell you a story that called The Cursed Inheritance, A Family's Burden. I hope you will love this story. So let's continue. Clara Holloway had always considered herself practical. She believed in the tangible world, the things she could touch, measure, and explain. Superstitions and ghost stories belonged to another era, one she had left behind long ago, buried beneath the weight of modern life. That was why, when she received the official-looking letter on a rainy afternoon, she didn't immediately feel alarmed. The envelope was thick, creamy, and bore an ornate wax seal, an unfamiliar insignia pressed into its center. Opening it, she found a letter typed with precision. Miss Clara Holloway, you are hereby notified that, following the recent passing of your great-uncle Victor Holloway, you are the sole heir to Holloway Manor and all associated estates and assets. You are advised to take possession at your earliest convenience. Be forewarned, however, that the Holloway estate carries with it a burden, one that has affected generations before you. Clara frowned and leaned back in her chair. A burden? How dramatic! She remembered her parents' distant warnings about the family estate, delivered in hushed tones during long-forgotten childhood dinners. Holloway Manor is no place for the living, her father had said once. Her mother had merely sighed, shaking her head. Clara had never asked for details, and now, decades later, it seemed that history was calling her attention with renewed insistence. Curiosity gnawed at her. She had never met her great-uncle Victor. He was a recluse, known for his eccentricities and wealth amassed under mysterious circumstances. Stories had circulated in the family, rumors of sudden disappearances of workers, whispers of dark deals struck in the dead of night, and an unbroken line of Holloways, whose fortunes seemed as cursed as they were prosperous. Despite the unease that pricked at the edges of her mind, Clara felt a surge of anticipation. This was more than a matter of inheritance. It was a story waiting to unfold, and she had always been drawn to stories. If nothing else, visiting Holloway Manor would provide the chance to explore an old mansion, to walk halls where time had seemingly stopped, and perhaps to uncover family secrets long hidden. She booked a train to the small town nearest to the manor, the landscape rolling into dense forests as the afternoon sun faded behind the clouds. By the time she arrived, the air had taken on a cold, damp bite, and the fog clung to the edges of the railway line. A hired driver, arranged by the law firm, met her and drove her the remaining distance along a winding road lined with gnarled trees. Holloway Manor appeared as the mist thinned, its jagged silhouette looming against the gray sky like a sentinel of another age. The structure was massive, its stone walls darkened with age, ivy crawling like veins across its surface. Clara felt a strange twinge, a mixture of awe and unease. The air around the estate was heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth and decay. Upon arrival, she was greeted by Mrs. Winthrop, the housekeeper, a woman whose age was betrayed only by her stooped posture, but whose eyes were sharp and penetrating. "Miss Holloway," she said in a voice that hinted at both respect and caution, "welcome to Holloway Manor. I hope you find it satisfactory." Clara smiled politely. "Thank you. It's impressive." Mrs. Winthrop's gaze lingered a moment longer. "Many Holloways have come here seeking fortune. None have left unscathed." Clara's smile faltered. "Unscathed? The house has a way of exacting its due." Mrs. Winthrop replied cryptically before turning to show her around. The interior was as grand as it was intimidating. Dust motes floated in beams of fading sunlight that struggled through tall, arched windows. Portraits of Holloway ancestors lined the walls, men and women in stern attire, their eyes dark and watchful, their expressions severe. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, as if those painted eyes were not merely observing her but judging her. The library, a cavernous room lined with towering shelves, became her first refuge. She ran her fingers over leather-bound volumes, each title a whisper from the past. As she explored, she found herself drawn to a small, intricately carved chest tucked into a corner. It was locked, and yet something about it seemed almost alive, as if waiting for her touch. That night, sleep came fitfully. Clara dreamed of shadowed figures whispering her name, echoing in a long, empty corridor. When she awoke, she found a silver locket on the bedside table, a locket she did not recall ever owning. Its surface was engraved with delicate vines, and inside was a tiny inscription: "Those who inherit shall also bear the sorrow of the Holloways." A chill ran through her. The word seemed almost alive, seeping into her consciousness. She wanted to dismiss it as coincidence or an elaborate prank, but a part of her could not ignore the dread creeping through her veins. Clara spent the rest of the day exploring the manor, finding rooms that had been untouched for decades, each filled with relics of a life frozen in time. But with every discovery came unease. A clock that had stopped at 3:15, a mirror that seemed to distort reflections ever so slightly, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, small disturbances that suggested she was not entirely alone. By evening, she realized that the inheritance she had once thought of as opportunity now felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. The letter's warning seemed less like an idle caution and more like a prophecy. Clara knew, with a sinking certainty, that her arrival at Holloway Manor marked the beginning of a journey that would test not only her courage, but the very bonds of her family and perhaps her own sanity. She whispered into the empty room, "What have I gotten myself into?" The wind outside answered, rattling the windows, as if the house itself were preparing to tell her its story. The morning air was thick with fog, curling around the ancient spires of Holloway Manor like ghostly fingers. Clara awoke to the muted sounds of the estate, the creak of floorboards in distant hallways, the low groan of wind against the stone walls, and the occasional drip of water from an unseen leak. Sleep had been shallow and restless, haunted by fragmented images of shadowed figures and whispered warnings. She dressed quickly, her fingers brushing the silver locket she had found the night before. Its cold weight pressed into her palm, and though she told herself it was a mere family trinket, an unsettling thought lingered. The locket seemed almost to pulse, as if attuned to her unease. Downstairs, the dining room awaited. It was a grand chamber, with a high ceiling adorned by an elaborate chandelier, though many of its crystals had dulled with dust. Mrs. Winthrop moved quietly among the polished tables, placing plates of food with careful precision. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met Clara's briefly. "Breakfast, Miss Holloway," she said. "I trust you slept well." Clara hesitated, unsure how to respond. "As well as one can in an old house," she said, finally forcing a smile. Mrs. Winthrop's lips twitched in what might have been amusement or disapproval. "Holloway Manor is not accustomed to light sleepers," she said, "nor to those unprepared for the echoes of the past." Clara nodded, accepting her toast and tea, though her appetite was minimal. Every creak and shadow seemed amplified in the vast, dimly lit room. As she sipped, she thought of the family she had barely known, cousins she had not spoken to in years, distant aunts and uncles whose lives had seemed like mere footnotes in her childhood memories. Now, all those connections and their unresolved histories loomed suddenly, as if the house itself demanded reckoning. It was then that the sound of a car approaching caught her attention. She looked toward the front windows, and through the morning haze, she saw a dark sedan winding up the gravel driveway. Moments later, the car door opened, and a tall man in a tailored suit emerged. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, and his face bore the sharp lines of a life lived with purpose, or perhaps with constant worry. "Clara," he called, his voice firm yet uncertain. "It's been a long time." "Michael?" Clara asked, recognizing her cousin instantly, though she hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. He smiled faintly, but there was tension in his posture, a stiffness that hinted at underlying friction. "Yes," he said, extending a hand. "I received the news the same time you did. Thought I should come see what's happening, and perhaps ensure the family legacy is preserved." Clara's lips pressed together. Michael had always been ambitious, even ruthless in pursuit of his goals. She recalled childhood arguments over inheritance, toys, and privileges, long forgotten but never forgiven. Now, standing in the shadow of the manor, those old grievances seemed trivial compared to the weight of what awaited them. Inside, Michael's presence changed the atmosphere. The air seemed heavier, more oppressive. Mrs. Winthrop showed him to a guest room, then left them alone to unpack her silence, a reminder that she observed more than she spoke. The day passed slowly. Clara explored the estate further, wandering through corridors that branched like a labyrinth. She found rooms filled with dusty furniture, ornate mirrors reflecting fragments of the past, and cabinets lined with yellowed ledgers chronicling the Holloway wealth over centuries. Among them were letters, photographs, and journals, records of marriages, betrayals, sudden deaths, and inexplicable disappearances. It became clear that the inheritance was not merely monetary. The Holloway name carried weight, yes, but also a legacy of sorrow. Every generation seemed to have been touched by tragedy, fortunes squandered, sanity fractured, relationships destroyed. Clara felt a chill as she read the notes of Victor Holloway himself, hints of fear and regret etched in his careful handwriting. That evening, the fog thickened outside, and Clara found herself drawn to the library once more. The air smelled of old paper and wax polish, and shadows stretched long across the shelves. She ran her fingers over the spines of countless books until a particular volume caught her eye. It was a leather-bound journal, the cover worn smooth with age. Opening it, she read Victor's final entries. The curse is real. It watches, it waits, and it punishes the greedy. I tried to contain it, to bear it alone, but it knows no mercy. Whoever inherits Holloway Manor inherits its burden, and with it, the choices of every Holloway before. A noise behind her made her start. She turned to see Michael standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You found his journal?" he said quietly. "I thought perhaps it was best left undiscovered." Clara held the book close. How could we ignore it? Look at what happened to him, to everyone before us. This curse, it's been with the family for centuries. Michael nodded, his eyes darkening. "I've heard the stories, of course, but we can't let superstition dictate our lives. The manor's wealth is ours to claim and protect." "But at what cost?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "Every ancestor left this house changed, broken. Are we so different?" He said nothing, merely studying her. And in his silence, Clara sensed the first real crack in their alliance. The manor was not just a home. It was a crucible, and she realized with growing dread that the curse might already be at work, testing them in ways neither could anticipate. As night fell, the house seemed to come alive. Whispers echoed faintly through the halls, and shadows danced just beyond the edges of candlelight. Clara felt eyes upon her, watching, judging. She clutched the silver locket once more, its cold weight a reminder that she had entered a place where the past was never truly past. And somewhere, deep within the manor, the Holloway legacy stirred, waiting to reveal its true nature. The morning sun filtered weakly through the tall, dust-streaked windows of Holloway Manor, barely illuminating the vast halls that seemed to stretch endlessly. Clara awoke with a lingering sense of unease, her dreams haunted by a figure cloaked in shadow, whispering her name over and over. She dismissed it as exhaustion from her long journey, yet a shiver ran down her spine as her hand instinctively brushed the silver locket resting on her nightstand. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Michael remained in his room, reportedly unpacking, leaving Clara alone in the dining hall with Mrs. Winthrop preparing the meal in near silence. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, as if watching, waiting. The old clock on the mantel ticked unevenly, and Clara noted that the pendulum swung with an odd, almost hesitant rhythm. Once breakfast concluded, she decided to explore further, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. There were wings of the manor she had yet to see, rooms locked away for decades, corridors leading to attics and basements whose purpose was long forgotten. Each door she opened revealed another fragment of history. Faded tapestries depicting Holloway ancestors in stiff poses, glass cabinets filled with brittle letters, and shelves heavy with the accumulated weight of centuries. As she wandered the west wing, Clara noticed something strange. One of the mirrors, tall and ornate, reflected not only the room but also a shadow at its edge. She spun around, expecting to find Michael or Mrs. Winthrop lurking, but the hallway was empty. The shadow in the mirror remained. Her heartbeat quickened, but rational thought demanded an explanation, perhaps a trick of light, a warped reflection caused by age and neglect. She told herself it was nothing, yet a seed of doubt took root. Later, as Clara reached the library once more, she discovered a small, intricately carved wooden box tucked behind a row of books. Unlike the journals and letters she had already seen, this box seemed alive. The carvings twisted in patterns that made her stomach churn, curling vines and faces of people screaming in silent anguish. The box was locked, but she could feel a pull toward it, as if it were calling her, urging her to uncover whatever it held inside. Her curiosity overpowered caution. She took the box to her room, attempting to open it with tools she found in the manor. When the lid finally creaked open, the room seemed to grow colder, and the shadows in the corners deepened. Inside lay a small bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon and a silver locket strangely identical to the one she had found the first night. Opening the letters, she read handwriting she recognized as her great-uncle Victor's. "To the heir," one began. "If you are reading this, the manor has chosen you. Know that its walls hold not just wealth but sorrow, and its shadows conceal more than dust. Do not dismiss the warning lightly. The locket you hold is a token, a reminder, and a key. Wear it, for it will protect you, but do not let it blind you to what is coming." A sudden noise made her flinch. The window rattled violently, though no wind was strong enough to disturb it. Clara froze, clutching the letters and locket. A whisper floated through the room, indistinct yet undeniably present. It was the faintest sound, almost a sigh, and yet it carried a weight, a sense of intent. The house seemed to breathe around her, and for the first time, Clara felt the curse not as a story, not as a warning, but as a palpable force pressing in on her. Every instinct screamed to leave, yet she could not. The inheritance, the history, and perhaps a sense of duty rooted her to this place. Later that evening, Michael finally approached her. His face was drawn tight, a frown shadowing his features. "Clara, I've noticed odd things, disappearances of items, strange noises, drafts in sealed rooms. I thought it was the house settling, but now I'm not so sure." Clara hesitated, then recounted her discovery of the locket and letters, and the whisper she had heard. Michael's eyes narrowed. "You found Victor's warnings?" "Yes," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "And I think there's more to it than superstition. I think the curse is real." Michael scoffed. "A curse? Really, Clara? We are not children. The wealth of the Holloways is ours. The stories, the whispers, they are distractions, designed to scare off the weak." But even as he spoke, Clara noticed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. They were alone in the vast room, and the flickering candlelight cast strange, moving shadows across the walls. The locket around her neck seemed to pulse faintly, as though responding to some unseen force. That night, sleep became impossible. Clara sat by the window, staring out at the fog-wrapped estate. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, though the manor appeared deserted. Footsteps echoed along empty halls. And then, faintly, the whisper returned her name, repeated in a cadence that was both beckoning and warning. "Clara, Clara." She wrapped herself in a blanket, heart hammering, realizing that the inheritance she had once thought of as fortune was a trap, a weight that came with consequences she could not yet fathom. And the Holloway curse, she knew with growing certainty, had begun its work. It was not merely history, nor were the shadows empty. The manor itself was alive, aware, and hungry for the next generation. Clara wondered, not for the first time, if she would survive the legacy that had claimed so many of her ancestors before her. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the reach of candlelight, the Holloway family's sorrow stirred, waiting, patient, and eternal. The fog hung heavy over Holloway Manor, swallowing the gardens and twisting the familiar shapes of statues and hedges into grotesque shadows. Clara moved through the halls, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls, each sound magnified as though the house itself were listening. The manor was no longer merely a building to her, it had become a living presence, a silent observer of her every move. Michael had spent the morning in the library, poring over ledgers and letters left behind by Victor. Clara had begun to explore the west wing once more, drawn to the rooms that had always seemed forbidden. Behind a heavy oak door, she found what she thought at first was a storage chamber. But the closer she looked, the more she realized it was a private study, Victor's true sanctum. Dust-coated bookshelves lined the walls, and in the center, a large desk held neatly stacked documents, journals, and strange trinkets whose purpose was not immediately clear. As Clara rifled through the papers, she uncovered letters that spoke of clandestine meetings, financial dealings that skirted the law, and more disturbingly, references to rituals performed by Holloway ancestors. She paused at one page, where Victor wrote in an unusually shaky hand, The wealth is bound to the manor through more than deeds and titles. It is tied to the bloodline and the choices of each generation. We have tried to protect it, but the cost is always our own. One day, the curse will demand its due again. The words made her stomach twist. She had always thought of her family as simply eccentric, occasionally cruel, and stubbornly proud. But the legacy Victor described was darker, an intricate web of greed, obsession, and superstition, intertwined with something that was beyond reason. Clara's unease deepened when she found a journal belonging to her own grandmother, entries written decades ago. The handwriting was meticulous but tense. One passage caught her eye. "We do not speak of the manor's true nature outside the family. The estate has taken much, and though we inherit its wealth, we inherit its burden as well. Father warned us, yet none of us listen until it is too late." A sudden noise behind her made Clara spin. The door had been closed when she entered, but now it stood slightly ajar. She stepped back, heart racing, and glimpsed a figure retreating into the hallway. For a moment, she thought it was Michael, but he had been downstairs, still buried in papers. "Who's there?" Clara called, her voice trembling. The figure did not answer, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Shaking, she returned to the desk and found a small hidden drawer. Inside lay a bundle of old photographs. Each depicted Holloway ancestors standing in front of the manor, their expressions severe, their eyes shadowed with something Clara couldn't name. As she studied them, she noticed a pattern. Every photo had a subtle irregularity, a shadow that seemed darker than it should be, a figure in the background that appeared twice in separate images, faces slightly blurred as if they had been erased, but not entirely. Clara's fingers trembled as she placed the photographs on the desk. The manor's legacy was more than superstition. It was insidious, alive, and persistent. Every generation had carried the burden, yet none had fully understood it. Later that afternoon, Michael joined her in the study, holding a stack of letters he had found in the main library. "Clara, you need to see this," he said, his tone uncharacteristically grave. Together, they read letters that detailed financial arrangements, property disputes, and something more chilling, personal accounts of illness, sudden death, and madness that had afflicted family members shortly after claiming the inheritance. It was undeniable. The Holloway curse was not merely metaphorical. Michael leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane. There has to be a rational explanation. Surely none of this is supernatural." Clara shook her head, clutching her locket. "Rational? Michael, look at the patterns. The deaths, the accidents, the breakdowns, every generation suffers. It's always someone who tries to claim more than their share or ignore the warnings." The two of them fell into uneasy silence. The weight of the family history pressed down on them, and for the first time, Clara sensed the full measure of the inheritance she had received. Holloway Manor was not merely a house, nor was it merely a source of wealth. It was a living archive of tragedy, of human folly, and of a curse that demanded obedience, or else. As the sun set, painting the halls in a pale orange glow, the atmosphere shifted. The manor seemed to whisper through the cracks in the walls, carrying faint echoes of laughter and crying, of voices long gone but never forgotten. Clara felt eyes upon her, watchful, expectant. She turned to Michael, who was unusually silent. "We need to understand it fully," she said. "We can't ignore what Victor and our ancestors left behind. The manor, it's testing us already." Michael nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. But how do we fight something we can't see?" Clara looked around the study, at the papers, the journals, the photographs. The answers were here somewhere, buried beneath layers of secrecy and fear. If they were to survive, if they were to break the cycle, they would need courage, cunning, and perhaps a willingness to confront truths too terrible to face alone. Night fell completely, and the house seemed to close in around them. Shadows deepened, and faint sounds, footsteps, whispers, and the soft sigh of doors opening on their own reminded them that the Holloway curse was not idle. It watched, it waited, and it demanded attention. Clara clutched the locket once more, feeling its cold weight against her chest. She realized that the true burden of the Holloway inheritance was not wealth or property. It was knowledge. The knowledge of what the family had endured, what they had sacrificed, and what they had failed to prevent. And with that knowledge came responsibility. The curse had chosen her, and perhaps Michael as well. Whether they would survive it, or whether they would become yet another chapter in the tragic history of the Holloways, remained to be seen. The manor settled into silence, but Clara could feel the house breathing around them. The shadows lengthened, curling into corners, stretching across the walls, whispering of trials to come. The legacy of the Holloways was not over. It was only beginning. The manor had grown heavier with each passing day. Clara felt it pressing against her chest like a living weight, a constant reminder that Holloway Manor was more than mere stone and timber. Even Michael, whose skepticism had been steadfast, now moved through the halls with a cautious reverence, as though he too felt the house's silent scrutiny. It began subtly at first. Small things, easy to dismiss. A candle snuffed out by an unseen breeze, a door that slammed without cause, a shadow slipping just beyond the corner of vision. But then the incidents escalated. One morning, Clara awoke to find her carefully organized desk in the study overturned, papers scattered across the floor in chaotic spirals. Nothing else had moved. Books remained upright, chairs in place, but the letters she had studied the day before were shredded as if torn by invisible hands. Michael arrived soon after, frowning. "This isn't possible," he muttered, picking up the fragments of the journals. "No one could have done this without us noticing." Clara shook her head, her hair falling into her eyes. "It's the curse. It's testing us, Michael. The manor doesn't want us to be comfortable. It wants control." He looked at her with skepticism, yet the doubt in his eyes betrayed him. Even he could no longer explain away the eerie occurrences that had begun to punctuate their days. Then came the accident. Clara had been descending the grand staircase, carrying the locket in one hand and a journal in the other, when the bottom step suddenly seemed to vanish beneath her. She stumbled, catching herself against the banister, her heart hammering. A floorboard groaned ominously under her weight, and she realized the manor was not merely passive, it was active, its very architecture conspiring against her. That night, the whispers returned. Clara lay in her room, listening as a low, undulating chant seemed to rise from the walls themselves. She clutched the locket, now damp from sweat, and tried to focus on the rational explanation. Perhaps the wind, perhaps echoes from empty corridors. Yet even as she reasoned, a cold breath seemed to graze her neck, and the shadows along the ceiling shifted in impossible ways. By the following morning, the house had crossed the line. Michael confronted her, his face pale and drawn. "Clara, something's happening to us. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel it, like the manor is alive and aware of our every thought." Clara nodded, unable to speak. She, too, had felt the change not just in the house, but within herself. Her dreams had grown vivid and nightmarish, filled with images of ancestors twisted in fear and despair, all reaching out as if to plead for release. And in her waking hours, she found herself becoming increasingly irritable, anxious, and obsessed with uncovering every secret the manor held. It was during one of these obsessive searches that Clara discovered a hidden passage behind the library shelves. The passage was narrow, lined with stone walls, slick with damp, and it descended into darkness. She hesitated, feeling a strange pull from below, a sense that the house itself was urging her forward. Michael, reluctantly following, carried a lantern that cast flickering shadows along the walls. At the end of the passage, they found a chamber that seemed untouched by time. Candles had long burned down to stubs, and strange symbols were etched into the floor in patterns that made Clara's stomach churn. At the center of the room lay an ornate chest, far older and more elaborately carved than the box she had found before. Clara approached, hand trembling. The chest seemed to hum with energy, almost vibrating beneath her fingers. Michael's voice was a whisper. "Clara, maybe some things are better left alone." But curiosity and fear propelled her. She lifted the lid, revealing a collection of artifacts, rings, coins, jewelry, and a small black book. The black book radiated something intangible, dark and heavy. Clara's instincts screamed at her to stop, yet she opened it. The pages were filled with Victor's handwriting, detailing rituals performed to contain the curse, warnings for future heirs, and accounts of ancestors who had failed. As she read, the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath hung in the air like mist. Shadows writhed along the walls, forming shapes she could barely comprehend. Michael stepped back, hand shaking. "Clara, you shouldn't be reading that." Before she could respond, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged, and Clara felt herself being pushed against the floor by an unseen force. The whispers became voices, repeating in chorus, "The Holloway must bear the burden. The Holloway must obey." Clara screamed, clutching the locket as a sudden light flared from its surface, illuminating the room. The shadows recoiled as though the locket itself were a shield, but the force pressing against her did not relent. When the light dimmed, they were both trembling on the cold stone floor. The chest remained open, the black book now empty, pages gone, as if devoured by the manor itself. Michael stared at Clara, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. "It's real," he whispered. "All of it. The curse, the warnings. It's real." Clara nodded, fighting back tears. She realized that the inheritance they had once thought a blessing was now unmistakably a burden, a weight that could crush them if they were not careful. The curse was not merely a story. It was a living force, intertwined with the manor, waiting for moments of weakness to strike. As they made their way back to the main hall, Clara understood that the battle was only beginning. The Holloway legacy was far more insidious than she had imagined. It had shaped her family for generations, dictating who lived, who died, and who suffered. And now it had set its sights on her and Michael. That night, sleep eluded her completely. Shadows moved in the corners of her room, whispers filled the hallways, and every creak of the house sounded like footsteps following her. She clutched the locket once more, the cold metal grounding her, and whispered to herself, "I will not be consumed. I will survive. I will uncover the truth, and I will end this curse, no matter what it takes." Holloway Manor had claimed many before her, but Clara Holloway was determined that she would not be another chapter in its tragic history. The air in Holloway Manor had grown thick, heavy with a sense of expectancy. Clara could feel it pressing against her, an almost tangible force that seemed to watch and measure every movement. Each step through the halls echoed like a warning. The events of the past days shredded papers, whispers in the night. The hidden chamber had left her shaken but also resolute. She would not let the curse control her. Yet the manor had a way of testing resolve, of exposing the weaknesses buried deep within one's mind. Michael had grown more cautious, nearly haunted in his demeanor. The skepticism he had clung to so stubbornly now wavered, replaced by unease and an unspoken fear. They had spent hours examining Victor's journals, piecing together centuries of Holloway history, and the pattern was undeniable. Misfortune always followed those who tried to claim the inheritance fully, who ignored the warnings or sought to exploit the manor for personal gain. Clara woke that morning to a faint tapping at her window. At first, she thought it was the wind. Yet when she looked outside, there was no branch, no sign of rain, only the fog-laden ground stretching into gray nothingness. The tapping grew insistent, rhythmic, almost deliberate, echoing in the silence of her room. Heart-pounding, she opened the window. A rush of cold air swept inside, carrying the scent of earth and decay, and something unseen grazed her cheek. She stumbled back, clutching the locket as though it could shield her from whatever presence lingered. When Michael arrived, drawn by her startled cry, Clara explained what had happened. He frowned, a crease forming between his brows. "It's the house," he said quietly. "It's alive in a sense. Not in the way we understand, but it reacts to us, to our emotions, our intentions." Clara nodded, feeling a shiver travel down her spine. The manor seemed to feed on their fear, amplifying their doubts and insecurities. That afternoon, she decided to confront the situation head-on. She and Michael descended once more into the hidden chamber behind the library, determined to uncover more about Victor's rituals, to understand how to defend themselves against the curse. The air in the chamber was colder than before. Shadows writhed along the walls as if alive, twisting into grotesque shapes that defied the geometry of the room. Clara's fingers brushed over the empty black book, remembering how it had devoured Victor's pages before. A whisper rose from the corners, low and sibilant. "The Holloway must suffer. The Holloway must obey." Clara shivered but pressed on. She carefully examined the symbols etched into the floor. Some of them were familiar, drawn from Victor's journal's protective wards, designed to contain the curse, but clearly incomplete. Others were alien, older, more primal, pulsating with a dark energy she could almost feel in her bones. Michael approached, holding a candle, his hand trembling. "Clara, something's moving." At first, she thought he meant the shadows. Then she saw a figure emerging from the corner of the room, indistinct but humanoid, its shape flickering like smoke. It had no features, only the suggestion of a face and eyes, dark pits that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. It's the curse," she whispered. The figure advanced slowly, and with each step, the temperature dropped further. Frost formed on the stone floor, and the candlelight flickered violently. Clara could hear whispers rising into a cacophony, all repeating the same chant: "The Holloway must pay. The Holloway must obey." Michael grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "We need to leave. Now." But Clara could not move. Something held her, a weight pressing down, a force that made her knees buckle. She clutched the locket, feeling its cold surface pulse against her skin. A sudden thought struck her. Perhaps it was not merely a token, but a tool, a shield. She concentrated, focusing every ounce of willpower into the locket, imagining it as a barrier between herself and the entity before her. For a moment, the figure wavered, its form flickering and shrinking. The whispers grew softer, the chill lifting slightly. Michael gasped in relief. "Clara, it's working!" Yet the reprieve was brief. The figure vanished entirely, leaving the chamber silent except for the faint drip of water from the ceiling. But Clara knew it had not gone far. The curse had been awakened fully, and this was only the beginning. That night, in the safety of her room, Clara's resolve hardened. She realized that the Holloway inheritance was not simply a burden, it was a trial, a relentless force that tested every thought, every choice, and every relationship. She could feel the strain on her connection with Michael. He was frightened, yes, but she also sensed skepticism lurking beneath his fear, a lingering doubt that could make them vulnerable. Sleep was impossible. Clara stayed by the window, listening to the whispering wind and the creaking halls. She made a silent promise to herself. "I will uncover the truth. I will understand the curse, and I will survive it, even if it destroys the manor around me." Somewhere in the depths of Holloway Manor, the shadows watched, waiting for the next moment of weakness. And somewhere deep within herself, Clara knew that the next confrontation would test not only her courage, but the very bonds that tied her family together. The curse was no longer a story. It was alive, and it was hungry. The morning air in Holloway Manor carried a damp chill, and fog swirled around the spires and turrets like restless spirits. Clara awoke with a pounding headache and a lingering sense of dread. The events of the previous night, the shadow in the hidden chamber, the whispering voices, the cold grip of unseen hands had left her shaken. Michael was already awake, pacing the length of the room, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. "We can't ignore it anymore," he said, stopping abruptly to look at her. This is beyond anything rational. The house, it's not just haunted, it's controlling us." Clara nodded, still clutching the silver locket around her neck. "I know. I feel it too. It's as if the manor knows our thoughts, our fears, and it uses them." The tension between them had grown, subtle at first, now impossible to ignore. Fear and frustration made communication strained. Clara's growing obsession with uncovering Victor's secrets clashed with Michael's insistence on caution. Their once united front now cracked under pressure, and the manor seemed to feed on it, amplifying their doubt and mistrust. As they moved through the West Wing that morning, they discovered the first tangible manifestation of the curse's escalation. A once sturdy bookcase, laden with heavy volumes, had toppled overnight, scattering books across the floor. The heavy scent of decay lingered in the air, though nothing had spoiled. "This isn't coincidence," Clara said, her voice tense. "The manor, it's trying to intimidate us, to weaken our resolve." Michael bent down to examine the fallen books, frowning. "I've never seen anything like this. It's deliberate. The manor, it's acting with intent." Their exploration led them to a long corridor lined with family portraits. Clara paused at a painting of Victor himself. For a brief moment, She thought his eyes moved, following her as she passed. Michael, seeing her hesitation, leaned closer. "It's just the angle of the light," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Later that day, as Clara sorted through more journals in the library, she discovered a letter that chilled her to the core. Written by an ancestor who had perished mysteriously in the manor, it described a creeping madness that overtook members of the family. Visions, whispers, paranoia, and a compulsion to act against their own interests. "They all went insane," Clara whispered, showing the letter to Michael. "It's not just misfortune, it's deliberate. The curse, it manipulates the mind." Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "We need a plan. If the curse affects our sanity, we can't rely on reason alone. We have to act carefully." As evening approached, the manor's malevolent presence grew stronger. Candles flickered, despite the absence of drafts. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the whispering voices returned, louder and more insistent than before. Clara felt a pull toward the hidden chamber, an irresistible force urging her to confront the source of the curse. Michael followed reluctantly, but the journey to the chamber strained their already fragile trust. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper in the darkness, amplified their fear. Clara's conviction that the locket would protect her conflicted with Michael's doubt, creating a tension that the manor seemed to exploit mercilessly. When they arrived at the chamber, the air was icy, and the shadows danced along the walls with an almost sentient energy. The black book lay on the floor where it had been abandoned, and the symbols etched into the stone seemed to glow faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Clara knelt, tracing the carvings with her fingers. "These are wards," she said softly. "Victor tried to contain the curse, but they're incomplete. There's a pattern here, something we're missing." Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure taller, darker, more defined than before. It hovered in the corner, its presence suffocating, its gaze fixed on them. The air grew heavier, each breath a struggle. Clara felt her mind waver, intrusive thoughts of despair and self-doubt flooding her consciousness. Michael grabbed her arm. "Clara, fight it. Don't let it control you." Clara nodded, focusing on the locket. The silver warmed in her hand, a faint glow radiating from it. The figure recoiled slightly, its form flickering as though the locket disrupted its hold. But it was relentless, and Clara knew the reprieve would not last. In that moment, the strain between them reached a breaking point. "Michael, we need to work together," she shouted over the rising whispers. "If we fight separately, it will consume us." Michael hesitated, doubt etched across his face, but finally nodded. "You're right. Together." Clara's resolve hardened. She realized that the curse fed on fear, division, and indecision. Only by facing it, united, combining knowledge, courage, and trust, could they hope to survive. As night fell, the manor seemed to pulse with anticipation. Shadows lengthened into every corner, whispers filled every hallway, and the temperature plummeted. Clara and Michael sat in the hidden chamber, the locket between them, poring over Victor's journals and deciphering the incomplete words. They worked tirelessly, their hands shaking, minds straining against the oppressive weight of the house. And though exhaustion threatened to overcome them, a fragile bond formed amid the terror, a determination to survive, to uncover the truth, and to break the cycle that had haunted their family for generations. Outside, the fog thickened, curling against the windows like tendrils seeking entry. Inside, the shadows waited, patient and unyielding. The curse had been provoked, and it would not relent. But for the first time, Clara and Michael felt a glimmer of hope, an understanding that the burden they bore, though immense, could be confronted together. The battle for the Holloway inheritance, for their sanity and their lives, had truly begun. The following morning, Holloway Manor seemed alive in ways Clara had never imagined. Shadows moved independently of light, stretching and recoiling as if observing every step she took. The whispers from the walls were no longer subtle, they rose in sharp, urgent tones, calling her name, warning, accusing. Clara and Michael convened in the library, poring over Victor's journals and letters, desperate for guidance. Their eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights, hands trembling from the constant tension. The manor had become a labyrinth of psychological torment, each hallway a potential trap, each room a reflection of their fears. I can't stop thinking about last night, Clara admitted, her voice tight. The shadows. The figure. It's not just a warning. It wants something. I don't know what. But it's testing us, pushing us to the edge. Michael rubbed his temples, frustration and fear mixing in his expression. And if we fail? If it drives us apart, or worse? Clara swallowed hard. The thought of succumbing to the same fate as their ancestors, broken by the house, was terrifying. Yet, she refused to give in. We have to face it, she said. We can't hide or ignore it. Every ancestor left clues. Every journal has warnings. The curse has rules, we just have to figure them out. The day passed in a tense haze, the manor testing them in small but insidious ways. Objects shifted slightly when they weren't looking. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight, and the occasional faint scream echoed through the halls, too faint to locate, but too deliberate to ignore. That evening, Clara decided to investigate the East Wing, where the oldest parts of the house were located. Michael followed reluctantly, casting wary glances at the shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls. The East Wing had been sealed for decades, its doors thick with dust and cobwebs. Clara forced one open, revealing a long hallway lined with portraits of Holloway ancestors, some of whom had died under mysterious circumstances. Their eyes seemed alive, following her movement, filled with unspoken warnings and accusations. As they moved deeper, the temperature dropped suddenly. Their breaths fogged in the air, and a low, guttural hum resonated from the walls, vibrating through their bones. Clara felt the locket grow heavy against her chest, its cold pulse intensifying. And then it struck. A door at the end of the hallway slammed open violently, sending a gust of frigid air sweeping through the corridor. Shadows poured out like smoke, swirling around Clara and Michael with a force that knocked them to the floor. Whispers escalated into screams, voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. The Holloway must pay. The Holloway must obey. Clara scrambled to her feet, clutching the locket. The silver glowed faintly, casting light against the darkness. Yet the shadows recoiled only momentarily. One surged forward, forming a humanoid figure, taller than either of them, its face obscured by darkness. Michael shouted, "Hold it together! Don't let it control you!" The figure lunged, and Clara felt an icy grip on her arm, pulling her toward the hallway wall. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she focused on the locket, imagining a shield of light surrounding her. The figure hissed, recoiling as the glow spread outward, pushing it back. But the curse was relentless. More shadows emerged from the walls, floor, and ceiling, each one writhing with intent. The manor itself seemed to pulse, feeding on their fear and exhaustion. Clara's legs gave way beneath her as Michael pulled her into the nearest room, a small chamber with reinforced walls and little in the way of furniture. Inside, the temperature normalized slightly, the oppressive force receding just enough for them to catch their breath. Clara pressed the locket to her chest, its faint warmth a reminder that they weren't defenseless. "We can't fight it blindly," she said, gasping for air. "We need to understand the rules, the wards, what Victor left behind. If we just react, it will destroy us." Michael nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Agreed. But the attacks are getting worse. Every day, it's stronger. And it's clever. It adapts to us, to our fear." Clara looked around the chamber, feeling the weight of the manor pressing against them. The curse had crossed the line. It was no longer subtle manipulation. It was physical, tangible, and deadly. She knew what they had to do next. Delve deeper into Victor's journals, uncover the ancient wards, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. But one thought gnawed at her. The curse was intelligent. It learned, and the longer they delayed, the more dangerous it would become. As night fell, the manor settled into a tense, eerie silence. The shadows lingered just beyond the candlelight, moving ever so slightly, as if watching, calculating. Clara and Michael huddled together, planning their next steps, knowing that the curse would strike again, and that the next encounter could very well be the one that claimed them both. Clara clutched the locket tightly and whispered, more to herself than to Michael, "We survive. We uncover. We end this. Whatever it takes." The house, silent for the moment, seemed to listen, and somewhere deep in its bowels, the Holloway curse waited patiently, ready to escalate, ready to claim. The night was black as ink, and Holloway Manor seemed to pulse with anticipation. Clara and Michael had spent the entire day deciphering Victor's journals, piecing together the fragments of wards, rituals, and warnings left by generations of Holloways. They now had a plan, a fragile, desperate strategy to confront the curse and, hopefully, contain it. Every hallway they walked seemed alive. Shadows stretched along the walls, shifting unnaturally, and the faint whispers that had haunted them for weeks were louder, more insistent, threading through every crevice of the manor. Clara felt a pressure in her chest, a tightness that came with the knowledge that the curse was aware, waiting for their next move. "We have to focus," Clara said, clutching the locket. Its silver glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "It knows what we're thinking. It can anticipate hesitation. We stick to the plan exactly." Michael nodded grimly, holding a lantern and carrying Victor's black book, now partially restored with missing pages they had recovered from the hidden chamber. "No mistakes. We do this together, or it wins." They made their way to the east wing, the oldest and most cursed section of the manor. Cobwebs hung thick in the corners, and the floor creaked ominously under their weight. As they approached the center of the wing, the air grew colder, denser, as though gravity itself had shifted. The shadows began to pulse and stretch, forming twisted figures, distorted silhouettes of Holloway ancestors, reaching, clawing, and whispering, "The Holloway must pay. The Holloway must obey." Clara and Michael positioned themselves in a circle of protective wards traced from Victor's instructions. Candles lined the perimeter, each flame flickering with unnatural colors. Clara recited the incantations from the journals, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Michael followed, invoking the counter-rituals that Victor had recorded in shaky, desperate handwriting. At first, nothing happened. The shadows writhed in place, testing, probing. Then, with a sudden gust of icy wind, they surged forward like a living wave. The floor beneath them shivered, as if the manor itself was attempting to crush the wards, to extinguish the candles, to break their concentration. Clara's voice trembled, but she forced it steady. "Focus on the locket. It's the key. Its light is stronger than the darkness." The silver locket flared brilliantly, casting light through the room, forcing the shadows back. They shrieked a sound that was part wind, part human scream, and recoiled into the walls. But the curse did not relent. From the corners of the room, more shadows emerged, darker, taller, more defined than ever before. One surged toward Michael, its form twisting into something monstrous, its face a blur of fear and rage. Michael stumbled, panic rising, and Clara lunged, placing her hand over the locket. A pulse of blinding light erupted, throwing the shadow backward and shattering it against the walls. The manor groaned, a sound like stone bones cracking, and the temperature shifted violently, from freezing to stifling within moments. The shadows regrouped, whispering incessantly, probing for weakness. Clara's hands were raw from holding the locket, her voice hoarse from chanting. Michael's resolve faltered for the first time, his fear manifesting in a tremor that threatened to break the ritual. Clara grabbed his wrist. "Hold it together. The moment we doubt, it wins. Focus every word, every symbol. We end this tonight." Together, they recited the final incantation, the last word written by Victor. The locket's light expanded, enveloping the chamber in a blinding radiance. The shadows screamed in unison, writhing violently before collapsing into themselves, sucked into the floor like smoke disappearing into a vent. For a moment, silence reigned. The oppressive weight lifted slightly, and the air no longer pressed against their lungs. Clara and Michael collapsed, exhausted, hearts pounding, eyes wide with disbelief. The locket's light dimmed but remained warm against Clara's chest, a reminder that the curse had been contained for now. Michael exhaled shakily. We did it. I can't believe it. We actually did it." Clara nodded, though she did not smile. "It's not over. The curse is bound to the manor. We've only contained it, weakened it. If we leave it unchecked, it will return, stronger than ever." Michael looked around the chamber, at the distorted symbols etched into the floor and the scorched remains of the shadows. "Then we finish it. We find the source, the origin. We end it completely. No more Holloway deaths, no more fear." Clara's resolve hardened. She realized that the true burden of the inheritance was not wealth or property, it was knowledge, courage, and the willingness to confront the darkness within their own family. The manor had tested them, brought them to the brink of despair, and forced them to confront the horrors of generations past. But now, for the first time, Clara understood. The curse could be challenged. It could be fought. And with determination, unity, and the guidance left by those who had come before, it could be ended. The shadows had receded, but their whispers lingered faintly, a reminder of the danger that still lurked in the depths of Holloway Manor. Clara and Michael exchanged a glance, both aware that the final confrontation was near, and that only one thing mattered: survival, for themselves, and for the generations yet to come. The manor was alive with a restless energy, as though it sensed the final confrontation was near. Every hallway seemed longer, darker, every shadow sharper, heavier. Clara and Michael moved with caution, but determination burned in their eyes. They had spent weeks deciphering Victor's journals, performing rituals, and surviving the relentless torment of Holloway Manor. Now, at the brink of the final encounter, they knew that there would be no retreat. The source of the curse lay deep beneath the East Wing, in the catacombs long sealed from the family. Clara and Michael descended the narrow staircase, their lantern casting flickering light against the damp stone walls. The air grew colder with each step, carrying a faint metallic scent: blood, rust, or something older, beyond description. At the base of the stairs, they entered a cavernous chamber, walls etched with arcane symbols. At the center was a stone pedestal, blackened by age, upon which rested a small obsidian box. It pulsed with a dark light, almost breathing, and Clara felt the weight of generations pressing down upon her. This was the heart of the Holloway curse, the origin of the family's suffering, the object that had dictated lives, deaths, and madness for centuries. "The source," Clara whispered. "It's alive." Michael's hand trembled as he approached the pedestal. "We have to destroy it, Clara. That's the only way to end this. No more wards, no more containment, just destruction." Clara nodded, clutching the silver locket tightly. The journals mentioned it. It can only be undone if the heir willingly confronts it, without fear, without hesitation. We must be united, together. The obsidian box began to vibrate, shadows rising from the floor like liquid smoke. Figures formed ancestors long gone, twisted in torment, their eyes hollow and accusing. The chamber pulsed with a malevolent force, and a voice, deep and cold, echoed through the cavern. "The Holloway must obey. The Holloway must pay." Clara stepped forward, her chest tight but her resolve unshaken. "We will not obey," she shouted. "We are the Holloways, but we are not slaves to this curse." Michael joined her side, and together they raised the locket over the box. Its silver glowed with intense light, illuminating the chamber and forcing the shadows to recoil. The whispers became screams, the air vibrating with raw energy. The box shuddered violently, and black tendrils of shadow lashed out at them, seeking to ensnare, to corrupt, to overpower. Clara's hands burned as she pressed the locket against the obsidian surface. Michael recited the final incantation they had pieced together, voice firm despite the chaos around them. The locket's light flared, blinding and brilliant, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The shadows twisted, shrieking in despair, and then like smoke caught in a storm they dissipated. The obsidian box cracked, splintering under the combined force of the ritual and the locket's light. A final, guttural scream echoed through the chamber, then silence. The oppressive weight that had haunted Holloway Manor for centuries lifted, leaving the air calm, almost serene. The fog that had shrouded the estate began to lift, sunlight filtering through the windows for the first time in decades. Clara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Michael collapsed beside her, breathing heavily, eyes wide with relief. For the first time, the manor felt empty, peaceful. The curse was broken. The Holloway inheritance, once a source of terror and tragedy, had been cleansed. They had faced centuries of pain, madness, and death and survived. Clara looked at Michael, a weak smile on her lips. "We did it. The curse, it's gone." Michael nodded, a mixture of disbelief and triumph in his expression. The Holloways, finally free. As they rose, they walked through the manor, sunlight illuminating rooms that had been shrouded in darkness for generations. The shadows were gone, the whispers silenced, and the oppressive presence that had haunted every step dissipated. Holloway Manor, once a prison of fear and suffering, now felt like home, a place where their family's legacy could finally begin anew. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Michael worked to restore the manor, preserving its history but removing the elements that had sustained the curse. They documented the rituals, the wards, and the truths they had uncovered, ensuring that future generations would know the dangers they had faced and the courage required to survive. The locket, now calm in its silver sheen, rested on a shelf in the main hall, a reminder of the darkness they had conquered and the strength they had discovered within themselves. Clara often reflected on the journey, realizing that the true burden of inheritance had never been wealth or property. It had been knowledge, courage, and the willingness to face one's fears without compromise. And as the manor settled into a peaceful rhythm, the Holloways, finally free from their generational torment, knew one enduring truth. No curse, no shadow, and no secret could ever diminish the strength of a family united by courage, love, and determination. The Holloway legacy, once cursed, had finally been redeemed.